So here outside of UNH, we just witnessed the Division II Boys Basketball Championship game. Jeremy Leveille, we're talking to Pete Tarrier from WGIR, and Pete, you're doing a little bit of promotion here. So we got your truck out here, we got the music going, we got the fans filing in for the Division I game. Great atmosphere and some nice weather here. But as for the game, Portsmouth just dominated Bedford in that championship game here today.
Yeah, that thing was over early. I mean, you could tell early on, Jeremy, that Bedford was just going to have problems getting into their offense, and they never did. Those Portsmouth guards on the perimeter, and you got to throw DeCesare in there as well, they did a tremendous job. And the big guys, Segranis and Charlie Dupree and Regazio and LaHoo, and those guys were in there, they did a nice job shutting them down too. Bedford just couldn't get into their offense, and when you can't get into your offense, you can't score. And then when you have problems defensively on the other end, well, Walker had them outscored at halftime just about, and it was over early in this game, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like Portsmouth, they just really had a good game plan out there. I mean, year in and year out, you got to give credit to Coach Mulvey and his staff. I mean, every year, this is the 6th straight year they made it to the quarterfinals, 5 straight years that they've been in the semifinals, and now their 2nd championship in the last 4 years. Just a great program that they got over there at Portsmouth, preparing their team for this game.
Yeah, Jim Mulvey is a tremendous coach, and look, those kids, that was a senior-led team. I thought that they were the odds-on favorite. You thought it too at the beginning of the season. They did have that minor blip where they lost those 2 back-to-back games, but I think we all know now that that was an aberration, and the real Portsmouth team is the team that we saw in the playoffs and the team that we saw out there today. Well, I'm just a little disappointed, not in Bedford, but in the fact that the game was not a good game, because I think we all wanted to see a really game, and we didn't see that today, unfortunately.
I thought it was going to be closer. I mean, I thought Portsmouth, with their experience and their speed in the backcourt, with 5 senior starters, whereas Bedford, they got a couple sophomores in the starting lineup. They haven't been here on this court before. Portsmouth is here every year. I thought Portsmouth would be the favorite, but I got to say, late in the game, in the semifinals, Hanover, Bedford, they had some problems, with turnovers. But up until that point, for the most part, Bedford looked pretty good in that semifinal win over Hanover. Hanover's a good team, and, they were dominating inside, dominating the boards. Trevor Fahmy was unbelievable inside for the Bulldogs, and I thought this game was going to be a lot closer. I thought, Portsmouth would win, but only by like 10 or 12, not by 25 like it ended up being.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a single-digit game. I just thought that Bedford had really stepped up late in the season and playing very, very well in the playoffs. The big guys were clicking. They were getting just enough from their guards. But the problem was, look, those guards, the problem that they had was they'd get it over half court, and then that tenacious defense by Portsmouth, Walker and Billy Lane, those guys, I think Billy Lane gets a lot of credit for being a good defensive player, but I don't think Kamal Walker does. And I thought those 2 guys were really, really key, and Bedford couldn't do anything about it, so that's why we had what we had, and it was a blowout win.
Yeah, so you got to give a lot of credit to Portsmouth. I mean, Kamal Walker, Billy Lane in the backcourt, and the guys up front that they have. I mean, I would think it wouldn't really be much of a discussion who Division II Player of the Year would be. When we talked Division II, going into the Final Four and going into the tournament, we were talking, who would be Player of the Year, and it looked like, Kamal was the guy, and there was a couple other guys, maybe Brandon Lennis, Sauhegan, or Pat Welch of Pembroke, but, their teams went out of the playoffs a little bit earlier than expected, and, I don't think there's any much debate, especially with the performance Walker had today, that he's the Division II Player of the Year.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and those 2 guys that you mentioned, Len and Pat Welch from Pembroke, had they been here in this game today, I mean, with the way the brackets were, we couldn't have Welch and Kamal Walker in the same game. It was going to be one or the other because they would have had to play each other, but it didn't work out. So Kamal Walker is your D2 Player of the Year, in my opinion, and I think, he could have scored a lot more than he did this year. He just didn't have to. He had a real good team around him, and he did what he had to do to keep the team winning, and I think that's also the mark of a great player and a great point guard.
And you got to like the unselfishness too. You know, there was a couple times during this game where, you know, he had looks, but, you know, passed up a good shot for a better shot for a teammate, able to penetrate into the lane and dish it off to a teammate for a layup. He had a couple of really nice laser passes on the break too, you know, from three-quarter court, firing it down court to a teammate for an easy layup in transition. Just a great performance by him and Portsmouth. But, you know, those other guys we just mentioned, Brandon Lyon and Pat Welch, they're underclassmen. They're coming back next year. You know, so looking ahead to next year, Portsmouth, they graduate their whole starting lineup. You know, Pembroke, they got Welch, Randy Maher, Matt Person's all coming back, Jordan Williams, and Brandon Lang coming back for Sauhegan. They have some other guys as well. So those guys will have their chance next year. But for this year, Portsmouth was a great season. I think you also have to give credit to Hanover. You know, nobody really, you know, counted for them going into the season. And I know, you know, you and I both talked to Coach Winslow for Hanover after their loss to Bedford in the semifinals, and you know, he was saying, you know, how he feels like he gets disrespected, you know, because they're up north and you know, they don't people down south don't get to see him as much, and you know, going to season, people are ranking them 10th or 11th, 12th in rankings, and you know, they had a great season. They ended up as the #1 seed going to the playoffs. So you have to give credit to Coach Winslow in Hanover. A good season, did a lot better than people thought they would.
Oh, sure, and there's no disrespect towards his program. It's just the fact is they're way up there, and most of the media is down here, and we're over on the seacoast right now when we do this. But you know, generally that Manchester area is where most of the media kind of originates from, and you get some on the seacoast, and they just don't see Hanover. They don't see Lebanon. You know, those teams are at the far outposts of Division II, and that's why. It's no disrespect against you guys. You're a great team. You're a great program. He mentioned that they had been in 5 Final Fours in the last 12 years. Not a lot of programs can say that except for Portsmouth, and he pointed that out when he told us that. But look, that's a very good program there, and you can expect more from them next year too, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, you know, they graduate Dan Gorman, you know, Laurel and Herman Stanzel, and a couple other key seniors, but they got some other guys coming back, and you know, Hanover's going to be a very good team next year in Division II. Year in and year out, they have a very good program, a good feeder system, and you know, he also mentioned that, you know, their assistant coach passed away tragically towards the end of the season, and you know, that really took a toll on their team. It was tough for them to deal with. You know, something like that happens. You know, I think at the time they were undefeated, and they were the only undefeated team in Division II. So something like that's tough to deal with. And you know, I had seen Lebanon. You know, they come down south to play a little bit. They play Pembroke, they play Pelham, but Hanover, you know, they play up there so much. It's tough to see them. But Lebanon and Hanover, you got to credit year in and year out. Those are two very good programs.
Yeah, and that's a great rivalry there too. And to think that they could meet in a quarterfinal playoff game, that's pretty cool. It's sort of like a Central Trinity matchup in the semifinals. You get those two rival schools playing for all the marbles in the playoffs, and you're going to have great atmosphere, and you're usually going to have great action on the court, and that's what we saw. And look, they need to go out there and prove themselves. They need to play even harder because of the fact that where they are, it's unfortunate, but that's the way it goes, unfortunately.
And you mentioned Lebanon and Hanover playing in the quarterfinals, which obviously made for a great game, great atmosphere with that kind of rivalry. And another quarterfinal game in Division II boys was Bedford and Sauhegan. You were at that game, and they played each other for the 3rd time in the season. You know, those are, I think, probably the 2 best rivalries in Division II, Lebanon and Hanover, Bedford, Sauhegan, and they just happened to both play each other in the quarterfinals. So great atmosphere, and you know, it probably would have been nice if fans could have seen both of those games, because the way they used to do it, all the quarterfinals were here at UNH, back to back to back to back. So, but the way it worked out, you could only see one of those games, which is kind of too bad.
Yeah, I remember coming up here, and you know, if memory serves me correctly, they used to do it on a Sunday, and they'd have a game starting at noon, and they'd just be going all day, and they do like a double session. Actually, they do 2 games early in the afternoon, and then 2 games in the late afternoon or the evening, and that was fun. It made for a long day, but guys like me and you, basketball junkies, we'll camp out. You know, if there's a 2-hour break, we'll go downtown and we'll grab something to eat or whatever. But that's fun, and they don't do it that way anymore. But But I don't think you can dispute that the atmosphere for these tournament games has been phenomenal. I mean, outside of that Bedford-Hanover game here at UNH on Wednesday night, the place has been banged out. You couldn't get a ticket. You know, it's been totally packed crowds, great atmosphere. And not that that was a poor atmosphere, it's just that think about how much of a hike it is from Hanover to get here. And Bedford, you know, I think that they're just starting to support their teams. They were out there in droves today. But I don't think you can fault the NHIAA for putting together the tournaments the way they did. They have limited venues to work with. They have limited time. And then you throw in crazy stuff that's going to happen along the way that might cause you to move a game because of a bus accident or something like that. I think they do a pretty good job with putting these tournaments together.
And I think one other team we got to give credit to in Division II, Pete, is Co-Brown.
Yeah.
You know, they were the 11th seed, and you know they went on the road to Pembroke and beat Pembroke. You know, the number 3 seed. I think a lot of people, me and you included, expected it to be Pembroke and Portsmouth in the semifinals. And Co-Brown, give them a lot of credit. You know, they had some losses during the season. They had Chris Lorion, the junior forward, Skylar Mitchell, the senior forward. Those 2 guys were injured for a lot of the season. Then once they got those guys back, along with Darren Doyon, Tommy Darling, they all started to get together and play well as the season went on. And you know, towards the end of the season, you know, not too many teams in Division II are playing better than the Co-Brown Bears.
Yeah, I think they were on an 8-game winning streak or something going into that game against Portsmouth. Darren Doyon really impressed me. I had heard a lot about him, I had read a lot about him, and I actually saw him in person, and pound for pound, he's perhaps one of the best players in the state of New Hampshire. He's one of those guys that I think could play, you know, at the Division I level and be a starter and a star on any team. Kamal Walker's another one like that, and there's a number of players like that, but he really impressed me. He's tough as nails.
Yeah, you know, he plays a lot bigger than he is. You know, only about 6 feet, maybe 6'1", but you know, he's in there battling for boards and has some tough finishes. Can also step outside and hit the 3-point shot as well. And you know, Co-Brown, you got to give credit to their coach. You know, Dave Smith. He's been there a long time at Co-Brown. He knows how to coach, get the most out of his players. And you know, another early postseason exit for Pembroke, 2nd straight year that they got bounced in the quarterfinals. Last year it was to Souhegan, and this year in the quarterfinals, losing to Co-Brown both times on their home court. But I think next year, Pembroke, you know, even though this year they were one of the favorites, didn't get it done. You know, next year so many teams are losing seniors. Portsmouth is losing seniors, Co-Brown loses seniors, Hanover loses some of their best players, and Pembroke, you know, their big three is coming back with Rennie Meyer, Matt Persons, and Pat Welch. You know, you got to, last couple of years they've had early exits, but you got to say next year that they're expected to be up there once again.
Well, they may not want to hear this now, but these losses, these last 2 years, are probably going to help next year. And I know Coach Alosa is going to be using that all in the offseason. They're going to be one of those teams that you're out there following when you're on your summer and fall basketball tour, watching these preseason games. And I think they're going to be back, and they're going to be the favorite going into next year. They just got to get over that. They're turning into Merrimack of Division I, where they couldn't win a playoff game. They finally did this year and got to the championship game. Maybe next year's the year that Pembroke does that.
Yeah, I mean, you have not only their big 3, Jordan Williams will be a junior next year. Andrew Hood, the kid that was only a freshman this year, he's coming back. I mean, you know, they have the talent to get it done. Next year, I think, is the year with, you know, Maher and Persons being seniors, you know, and those other guys being juniors. Next year's the year for Pembroke, but, you know, and I think also with Len coming back to Souhegan's going to be up there. What about Bedford? I mean, Bedford, you know, they lose Fahmy and Glassman, but they got a lot of guys coming back. I think, you know, there's a pretty good chance they could be back here at UNH at least to make the semifinals. Hanover's going to be tough. Bedford, with their big guys, they lose Fahmy, but McManus, Larrabee, they're coming back. Caparell's coming back. Cam Messervy, even though Bedford had a tough game, Messervy with 9 points in the second half. He did pretty good out there for them. Will only be a junior next year for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, he was huge in that win over Souhegan in the playoffs. Had 20 points in that game. I think Colin McManus has really stepped up his game. He didn't play well today, but I don't think that was necessarily his fault. I think that was more Portsmouth's fault than it was anybody on Bedford or Colin himself. But I think he's going to be a force next year. And oh, by the way, he's a junior next year, so he's got 2 more years if he stays in school. We know a lot of these kids going to prep school or whatever, but I hope...
Can't teach height. 6'10" is only only a sophomore.
Yeah, you can't teach it, and maybe he'll get even taller, who knows. But I think he's going to get tougher and maybe bigger and stronger, and he's going to be nasty next year. And if he sticks around his senior year, he's going to be tremendous, I think.
Yeah, him and Larrabee down low, and then they got the kid Sam Thomas, who's 6'8", only a junior. Their size, you expect them to be in there as well. I think Pembroke's going to be the favorite, but Hanover's going to be tough. Sauhegan, but Portsmouth might have to be in a little bit of a rebuilding year. I mean, I think year in and year out they're here at UNH, but next year might be the year that will be the toughest. It'll be the toughest coaching job for Coach Mulvey next year, with 7 seniors graduating. I mean, basically their top 7 players all graduating. They got Ben Landry, Jack Mackey coming back to the team, but be a tough job for Coach Mulvey to get them back here. But I'll never count him out, the job he's done over there the last few years.
Maybe he'll hang it up. Maybe he'll say, I'm done, I'm retired. My son is moved on a few years ago. I stuck around for a couple of years because I knew I had a pretty good core of guys. Maybe he'll step down. I don't know anything. I haven't heard anything, but you never know. Maybe he will. But if you know him, he's a very competitive guy. He likes to coach. He'll probably be around. And I'm sure they're going to be just fine. You hear the old adage.
I'm sure they get kids coming up from JV that are going to step in and do just fine.
Yeah, you mentioned you can't teach height. Here's another cliche for you. They don't rebuild, they reload. And that seems to be what happens at Portsmouth.
So that's our Division II boys basketball season review, and a little bit of a sneak peek in next year as well at the 2012-2013 season in Division II boys basketball here at UNH. Pete Tarrier doing a little promotion for his station. Why don't you tell people what you guys are doing out here to promote your station?
Well, a big sponsor of my show, the New Hampshire High School Sports Show on GIR AM 610 and 96.7 The Wave on the Seacoast. We do it every Saturday morning from 7 to 9. My sponsors, the NEAF Network organizations, and their great website, iamcollegebound.org. If you are college bound, you're thinking about going, go to that website, iamcollegebound.org. And right now we're giving away a Kindle Fire and tickets to Blink 182 concert at the Verizon Wireless Arena. So we've been kind of working with all the students and having a lot of fun.
So that's Pete Tarrier. I'm Jeremy Leveille for the New Hampshire Notebook, nhnotebook.com. Thanks for watching.